word itself is a proclamation enough today. Still, I'm going to give a shorter than normal homily. I'm kind of geeky about form when it comes to putting my own homilies together. And we started outside this morning and we came in and kind of did a full circle. I want to take us on a similar sort of journey this morning, a sort of procession around a circle. I want to start here. We are on a journey together as a church, as a community. We're stumbling through the dimness of life together. A lot like, imagine those disciples, how they must have stumbled after this moment. Life was dark, life was dim, they didn't know where to go. They were blind in a way, and yet they had to go forward. Even after the crucifixion, the resurrection, Jesus spending time among them, and the ascension, there was a dim way forward as well. How do we start the church? How do we carry on Jesus' mission? But it's okay. It's okay to be blind. It's okay to listen rather than try to talk and act like we have the answers. It's okay to be a novice at things instead of coming across like an expert. It's okay not to know the answers as we go forward together. It's okay. It's just not that easy in our culture because we highlight individualism. We value it. We're a church. We're a community. We're called together to collaborate in order to carry on Christ's mission of bringing salvation to the ends of the earth, just as the early disciples were called. It's much easier to take this journey, to stumble through life blindly, together as a community, than it is alone. So that's where we're starting today. This Christian journey was never meant to be taken alone. Next, maybe a station along the way, we have a difficult question that's been posed throughout the history of the church. And there have been some answers too, but it's a riddle. Maybe these answers are right, maybe they're not. This question I'm talking about that has brought tension, lots of tension to the Christian church, is why did Jesus die on the cross? Now there's a popular answer. It's been popular for a good millennium or so. Jesus was a propitiatory sacrifice. Yeah, that's a theological term, propitiation. Propitiation is this idea that God is angry because of sin, and God needs a sacrifice to atone for sin. And we see this happen in the Old Testament. For instance, when Aaron and the Israelites were at the bottom of Mount Sinai, Moses was up there receiving the Ten Commandments. Remember what Aaron and the Israelites were doing? They gathered their gold, they melted it down, they made a golden calf, and they worshipped it. Moses came down and was like, what? God said, I am angry. We need to have an atoning sacrifice for this. So Aaron, the high priest, repented and led the community of Israel in an atoning sacrifice. You know what happened though? A little bit later, the Israelites grumbled about food. I don't like the manna you've given us, God. In fact, we had it better food-wise back as slaves in Egypt than we have it out here in the wilderness. Of course, the story goes that God got angry again. They needed another propitiatory sacrifice to repent for their sins. And a little later, they needed another one because they had turned to idols again, being impatient, waiting for God. Do you get the picture? By chapter 29 in the book of Numbers, I was like reviewing all the Pentateuch this week. Chapter 29, an annual sacrifice of propitiation is installed for the people of Israel. This does not, appeasing God's wrath according to this Old Testament, it became an ongoing need for the people of the Old Testament, for the Old Covenant. We people of the New Covenant, it's a nice logical conclusion that, okay, we don't need this anymore because Jesus' sacrifice on the cross covered this. And that's been this answer that's been popular in the church for about a millennium. In fact, it's even in our own prayer book. It's in the Rite One Eucharistic prayers. There are words like this: Jesus is one oblation. Jesus is a full, perfect, and sufficient sacrifice. A satisfaction for God's wrath. It's all kind of a hangover from the 1928 prayer book, from some of these old theological ideas. Rite Two, though, I'm happy to say, it gets away from this language. By the time the new prayer book, which is almost 40 years old, but by the time the new prayer book was put together, theologians were reaching a consensus that, hey, maybe this isn't the best answer. Maybe it's not even the right answer. Maybe it's not the most compelling. There's other options out there. And in this sense, I think the adoption of a new prayer book was a really good thing. Maybe it's time even to adopt a newer one, but we'll talk about that on another day. I don't want to get off on that tangent. So we continue our journey with this wondering, what is it then? If Christ's death on the cross wasn't a propitiation, or why don't you like this answer of propitiation? The next stop on our journey is to say, for one thing, here's why not. God is love. The picture of love is very different than the picture of propitiation. Propitiation says we all stand in judgment of our sin. And it's true, we do. But the wages of sin, our death, leads us to saying that a picture, we're lining up for our execution, awaiting that. That's what we're awaiting. It's a very pessimistic sort of view of life. But Jesus, sinless Jesus, took our place. That picture, it clashes with verses, for instance, like John 3:16, which says, for God so loved the world that he condemned his only son to death. No, it doesn't say that. You see the clash? What it says there, the verb, I think we all know it. God so loved the world that he gave. Gave's a good picture of love, right? Because you give when you love. And giving, there's risk involved. God took a risk in giving his son to the world. I take a risk when I give my son a birthday present. And I value that birthday present maybe more than he does, and he abuses and neglects it. And I'm like, oh no. But it's a risk to give it to him. It's a risk. And God took the risk that his gift might be mocked and crucified, beat, which it was. Now, this is giving me some trouble. I'm going to shut it off and use this. So that's what love does. It gives. And giving, we all know, it's risky. But that's one reason this propitiation idea is difficult. It's difficult for me to swallow. Love offers a more compelling picture. There's a second reason, and this brings us back full circle on our journey. And that's to end where I started. Propitiation really puts it all about the individual. It's because of you and your individual sins that Christ died in your place. And we're about community. We're on this together. Community has a couple sides to it. When it's working well, when we're in this together, we help each other on our journey. But when you remove God from the equation, community can often become very harsh. You can have things like oppression and victimization. We've seen this throughout the world. Suffering. That's the bad side of community. Injustice, oppression, victimization. These things actually, they don't happen when I'm alone. When I'm by myself, I'm not oppressing myself. At least I hope they don't happen when you're alone. But they happen in community when one person or one group of persons decides to overshadow, oppress, put another group into the place of being a victim. This makes a clear picture to me of why Christ came and why Christ died. He was treated unjustly. He was a victim. He was oppressed. And these things are what Christ came to put an end to. This is what a new heaven and a new earth are all about. Christianity is not a religion that calls on me alone to take up my individual cross and follow Jesus. We hear a lot about that, taking up our crosses and follow Jesus. And it's true, we each have our own crosses to bear. But this is a collective, corporate idea. Jesus died on the cross, not for my individual sins, but for the sin of the whole world. That's why he came. So it's still a riddle. I'm still wrestling through it. I think we're all wrestling through it. But here's another answer that I find more compelling. It comes from a retired professor at Yale, a theologian named Margaret Farley. Listen to this answer. The point of the cross is not finally suffering and death. It is rather that a relationship holds. There's a love stronger than death that can withstand whatever the forces of evil do against it, and that can hold suffering even as it struggles to alleviate it. Wasn't this the love of Christ on the cross? Holding suffering even as he was here to alleviate it. This is how we are kicking off Holy Week this year. I hope you'll take this home and meditate on this idea. Christianity calls on us together to take up the cross as a symbol of systemic oppression and injustice and fight against it. Christ's mission is that we bear this cross, we resist, and we hope. And by that, we bring salvation to the ends of the earth. Amen.
Amen.